me to Proverbs with Proverbs. Now, if you'll remember what we're doing, we went through the first section of Proverbs, and we did that verse by verse. Now we've gotten to Proverbs proper, and because themes are repeated so many times over and over again, we are kind of moving topically through the Proverbs. And if you'll remember what Proverbs are, those short, pithy sayings that tell us how to live life in God's creation, how to live properly in the world that God has created us to live in. And so we're looking at those Proverbs. And last week we looked at speech, and we looked at speech can be good or it can be bad, how we use it, and the determining factor is our heart. And so this week I want to move on, and I want to look at another topic that sometimes people have a hard time with, and that's money. Now, if you ask people today, there's a lot of conflicting ideas about money. Some say that it is bad or sinful to be rich. They would say that having money at all is greed, and that means it's sinful. Others would say that it's virtuous to be poor. That to be poor means that you must be godlier, or more godly, I guess is the proper English there, but you must be more godly. And then, of course, we got the others that see money as a blessing from God, and he would certainly want to bless his people, and it's the source of security that God gives you. And you have many of those pastors out there that are preaching wealth, and you should have wealth, you just have to claim it. Well, if we turn to the Bible as believers, one of our more important questions is, what does the Bible say about money? And the Bible has a lot to say about money. You can find teachings on money throughout the Bible. And we see that it speaks about earnings and spending and saving and giving. It even warns us against wasting money. And of course, Proverbs in particular has a lot to say about money. Solomon had a lot to say about money, and he should, because he was one of the wealthiest people alive. He has a little bit of experience in this area. If we turn to 1 Kings 10, we're told, now the weight of gold that came to Solomon in 1 year was 666 talents of gold. Besides that which came from the explorers, and from the business of the merchants, and from all the kings of the west, and from the governors of the land. A talent represents an enormous amount of money. It's a lot. 666 is a lot of gold. It's been estimated that this, in current terms, is about $4.3 billion. Can you imagine getting $4.3 billion every year just as your base salary? Not counting what you're raking in from the businesses and people below you. Solomon knows something about money, and he has a lot to say about it. So we're going to look today about money, and we want to begin by regarding having wisdom and how we use money in our wealth. And we see when we go to to Proverbs, that wealth is a blessing from God. There's nothing evil necessarily about wealth. It has some advantages. It can provide a degree of security. Proverbs 18:11 states, a rich man's wealth is his strong city, and like a high wall in his imagination. It provides some level of security. It also says, the ransom of a man's life is his wealth, but a poor man hears no threat. Wealth can provide as a blessing from God to provide security. But even more important than that, it's a blessing from God that we steward to help others with. Proverbs 14:20 and 21. The poor is disliked even by his neighbor, but the rich has many friends. Whoever despises his neighbor is a sinner, but blessed is he who is generous to the poor. So it can be used as a blessing. Proverbs 19, we get this. Wealth brings many new friends, but a poor man is deserted by his friends. Many seek the favor of a generous man, and everyone is a friend to a man who gives gifts. All a poor man's brothers hate him. How much more do his friends go far from him? He pursues them with words, but does not have them. So wealth is a blessing of God, but it's not a blessing of God for us to lord over others, but it's a blessing of God that we can use, or that he can use through us, to bless others. And we see that we should be using it to bless others. And wealth we have to be careful with, because it does provide some power and influence that come from being wealthy. And so we have to make sure we're yielding our wealth to God. Proverbs 22:7. The rich rules over the poor, and the borrower is the slave of the lender. Now, you've probably heard that verse many, many times, and it's always focused on the second half, isn't it? The borrower is a slave to the lender. And it probably goes some sermon like, you shouldn't be in debt to others. You shouldn't borrow. But I want to focus on the beginning. It is the rich rules over the poor. You can misuse your wealth as power. And as believers, we should know that it's God's money. He's given it to us, and we should use it to bless others, as we've seen. It even provides some opportunity to speak a little freer than you would otherwise. You've probably been in places where you felt you've had to bite your tongue so that you didn't lose your job, or so that you didn't lose a friend. We see that in Proverbs. Proverbs 18:23. The poor uses entreaties, but the rich answer roughly. We can misuse our wealth and freeing up our tongue to speak wrongly, as we saw last week. However, wealth does not. So wealth provides some level of security. It's a blessing from God. But what we need to understand is wealth does not provide ultimate security. God's the only one that provides ultimate security. It does not deliver us from death. Look at Proverbs 10:2. Treasures gained by wickedness do not profit, but righteousness delivers from death. And Proverbs 11 says, riches do not profit in the day of wrath, but righteousness delivers from death. So wealth or money shouldn't be our goal. It shouldn't be what we seek, but we should trust God in the accumulation of wealth. Now, when I say wealth, I probably need to slow down here just a minute. When I say wealth, you're probably thinking of billionaires. And we're all like, well, I wish I had that problem. But if you go anywhere in the world, you're probably wealthy. We have a lot of wealth simply by the blessings of God of being born and living in this country. And we may look at others and go, well, I don't have very much money at all. But we look at others around the world, or even in our country, and we're wealthy in comparison. So when we talk about wealth, we can't think, well, that's for other people. No, that's for us. It's been said that those who are poor and are stingy or don't use their wealth when they're poor will never use their wealth wisely or to help others if they become rich. It's not about the availability of money, it's about our attitude toward money. Whether I think it's mine or whether it's God's and I'm the steward of it. And so as we go through these, we have to think through being a steward. Those who trust in their riches will fall, we find. We have to trust in God. Proverbs 11:28. Whoever trusts in his riches will fall, but the righteous will flourish like a green leaf. A green leaf showing growth, showing nutrients, showing being healthy. We want to thrive in our relationship with God, then we have to be generous. We have to put our trust in God and not in our wealth or our resources. We should trust in God in how much or how we accomplish, and not try to make our own way or try to manipulate our way. We're told in Proverbs, wealth is better gained gradually through labor, Proverbs 13:11. Wealth gained hastily will dwindle, but whoever gathers little by little will increase it. It's right, it's proper to work for our wealth. Proverbs 20:21. An inheritance gained hastily in the beginning will not be blessed in the end. Now, does that mean inheritances are bad? No, but it means there was no effort put into it. How many rich people do you see their great-grandfather or somebody in their line had worked hard and built an empire by working hard and saving and investing and all of that, and yet by the time it gets to the grandson and it's just handed to them, they squander it because they don't have an appreciation for it, and more importantly, they don't have appreciation for where it ultimately comes from. Not from that grandfather, but from God, to be used for his end. Proverbs 28:20. A faithful man will abound with blessings, but whoever hastens to be rich will not go unpunished. Notice the difference here. A faithful man will abound with blessings. It is God who determines, and as God's, we are simply stewards. If you want to experience God's blessings, then you have to be faithful. That includes with your money. And it certainly can't be acquired by unscrupulous terms or ways trying to manipulate others. We're told that bread gained by deceit is sweet to a man, but afterwards his mouth will be full of gravel. It seems sweet to be able to get something for nothing, but God's not going to bless it. And in the end, we'll be sorry. We'll despise it. Proverbs 21 tells us, the plans of the diligent lead surely to abundance, but everyone who is hasty comes only to poverty. The getting of treasures by a lying tongue is a fleeting vapor and snare of death. The plans of the diligent surely come to abundance. Those who plan and follow God in their vocation, in how they use money, God will bless. He will bless. We'll experience his blessings. Now, that might not be with a great return of money. It may be the blessings of peace, maybe the blessings of good relationships, lack of stress. But God will bless when we honor him and we're faithful. But whoever hastens to be rich will not go unpunished. The getting of treasures by a lying tongue is a fleeting vapor and snare of death. Believers should always keep wealth in our eternal perspective. Should keep my bank account, whether it's full and has a lot of zeros after it, mine doesn't. Or whether it doesn't have very many zeros, hopefully it doesn't have that negative sign in front of it. But no matter where my bank account is, no matter how much money I have, my trust has to be in the Lord, and I have to keep it in eternal perspective. I'm sure you've heard it said, and I think I've even said it before, you've never seen a hearse pulling a U-Haul. We even saw in our prayer request today, this lady who has bought property, who's dreamed of having this wonderful house, and I don't know her, but it reminds us that God has numbered our days. To acquire great wealth, and then all of a sudden our time is up. God has set enough time on this earth. It's time to come home. Doesn't mean anything if my bank account's full of money and I didn't use it for God's glory. Wealth is simply a resource of many resources that God has provided for us to serve him. So we have to keep an eternal perspective. And Proverbs 23 tells us that. Do not toil to acquire wealth. Be discerning enough to desist. When your eyes light on it, it is gone. For suddenly it sprouts wings and flying like an eagle toward heaven. When our goal is simply wealth, when all we can see is the money that is there, or the electronic numbers that represent the money in our account, then isn't it funny how it just disappears? Isn't it funny how you could get money and you think, wow, I'm going to get ahead, and all of a sudden it's gone. Or God could bless you with resources and you can say, how do I glorify God with this? And maybe the zeros go away, but you poured into somebody's life. See, that doesn't go away, does it? That stays when you can pour into somebody's life. That's eternal. And we need to have an eternal perspective with our wealth. So as we see, wealth can be a blessing from God to help others, or it can be a curse that entraps a person. The difference is wisdom, is understanding why God created us to glorify Him, and how He desires to use us to help others. And when we have that perspective, then any wealth we acquire that God deems to bless us with becomes a blessing to us instead of a curse. But not everybody has wealth, right? There are people that have poverty. There are people that live in abject poverty. I'm not talking you just don't have enough money to go out this week. I'm talking people that live with nothing. And there are reasons and there's wisdom in how to live in poverty. First, some people are in poverty because of circumstances beyond their control. We have to recognize that. Those are the people we should see and want to help. Those that it's not their fault. It's just where God has them, and He has us to help, to be His hands and feet. They may be victims of greed of others. Proverbs 30 tells us that. There are those whose teeth are swords, whose fangs are knives, to devour the poor from off the earth, the needy from among mankind. There are those who do not know God, who have the wrong attitude about wealth, who seek to accumulate wealth, who have the philosophy of life is the one with the most toys in the end wins, that will run over others and hurt others in the process. But then there's the wisdom we just saw about wealth that says, God, thank you for blessing me so I can be a blessing to others. Those are the people we want to find. Those are the people we want to help. Some are others. Proverbs 28 talks about this also. Whoever multiplies his wealth by interest and profit gathers it from him who is generous to the poor. We want to see and seek God's blessing so that we can be used. And so sometimes there are people that's not their fault, but God has them there, and maybe He has them there so that we can be used by Him to demonstrate His grace and His mercy to the world. Those are the people we want to find and we want to help. But there are others that we have to be honest about it. Sometimes people are in poverty because of their own sinful conduct. They have created their own situation and they're experiencing God's judgment because of their conduct. It may be because they're lazy, and the Proverbs talks a lot about laziness. Proverbs 10:4 says, a slack hand causes poverty, but the hand of the diligent makes riches. A slack hand, those who are lazy, those who don't want to work, cause poverty. There are those who don't have because they seek or desire not to put the effort in and trust God in it. Those are people that we don't have that responsibility to help. They have to experience the judgment of God, the discipline of God, before we're ready to come alongside them and help them make better choices. Proverbs 14 says, in toil there is profit, but mere talk tends only to poverty. If you're going to talk about doing something, if you're going to talk about getting a job, if you just want to post on your local website or your local neighborhood app or something that I need a job, but every job all of a sudden isn't the right job for you, then that's why you live in poverty. That's why you don't have. It's because you don't see the blessings of God. There are people who refuse to see the blessings of God because they think they're above that job or above that work. Let me tell you, I've worked some manual labor jobs in my time. I've worked unloading trucks back before we had forklifts. I've worked roofing jobs in Houston where it's hot and humid. I've worked landscaping jobs when you're out there in the beating sun or the cold. I've worked some tough jobs. And you know what? Not a one of them was I above. I remember after I graduated college, graduated Texas A&M, I'm this new graduate. I have my fresh degree. I'm ready to go slay the world. I have a contract that I've signed with the military. They couldn't get me into a basic course date for a few months. So I lived in a 16-foot travel trailer where we weren't sure if the butane lines were good or not. So we were told, don't use it, take cold showers. And I worked at Pizza Hut across the street from the school. I was the guy that came in early, made the dough, and made the pizzas for the buffet all the students came to with my college degree. That was a blessing from God. We didn't have anything, but God blessed us. He gave me a job that also gave me dinner at night because we got to bring the leftover pizza home. I ate a lot of pizza in those days. But it wasn't beneath me simply because I had some sheepskin that said I was a college graduate. God blesses us, and those in poverty many times miss the blessing. Proverbs 20 tells us, love not sleep, lest you come to poverty. Open your eyes, and you will have plenty of bread. That doesn't mean you can't enjoy a good night's sleep. Doesn't even mean you have to wake up every morning when the alarm goes off and jump up and say, oh boy, I get to go to work for another day. But it means don't roll over and be late. It means enjoy your time, but also understand that God has provided you with the opportunity, and you take that serious. Love not sleep, lest you come to poverty. Instead, open your eyes, and you will have plenty. The implied principle by going to work. And then we get this parable out of Proverbs 20. I passed by the field of a sluggard, by the vineyard of a man lacking sense, and behold, it was all overgrown with thorns. The ground was covered with nettles, and its stone wall was broken down. Then I saw and considered it. I looked and received instruction. A little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands to rest, and poverty will come upon you like a robber, and want like an armed man. The parable, this guy's walking and he sees this field, and it can be a productive field. We're told it's a field, a vineyard, and it can grow crops. It can help, it can provide for the field's owner. It can help others with the crops that come out of it. And yet he looks, and it's overgrown with thorns and nettles, and it's not producing what it was meant to produce. And he looks, and God gives him the lesson. The lesson is, don't be lazy. Laziness comes to ruin. Be dedicated to work for the Lord. That comes for money, but it also comes in our spiritual life. We're talking about money, but I think this is a good place to say this also applies to our spiritual life. We can't be lazy with our spiritual life. We're like that field. God has created us with a purpose. He's created us to use us to bless others. We have a purpose. We're a fertile field, but are we growing nettles? Are we growing the crop that God has for us to become? We can't be lazy. Some are it's not laziness, they just refuse to heed correction of others. They're unteachable. We're told that in Proverbs 13. Poverty and disgrace come to him who ignores instruction, but whoever heeds reproof is honored. Sometimes we're too hard-headed and wanting what we want, the way we want it, when we want it, instead of listening to the instruction of others, and even more listening to the instructions of God. When he says it's time to go to work, when he says it's time to speak to this other person, when he says it's time to bless this person and trust me for what you have and that I'll provide. It's sometimes we don't heed instruction, whether it comes to another human or whether it comes from God. It all ultimately comes through God. And so sometimes people in poverty, for their own bad decisions, could be laziness, it could be refusing to heed correction, but I think a lot of times it's for this last reason. It's because they seek pleasure more than responsibility. They are so bent on, I want what I want. I want to experience this. I don't want to miss out on what I'm doing or what I can have. And so they pour all their resources into what they want instead of seeing that it's God's resources and we're stewards to help other people with. Proverbs 21:17 says, whoever loves pleasure will be a poor man. He who loves wine and oil will not be rich. If our desire, if our love is for the things of this world, then it will consume us and any blessings that God has given us, instead of us experiencing the peace and the pleasure that comes from being used by God to help others. Proverbs 23:21. Be not among drunkards or among gluttonous eaters of meat, for the drunkard and the glutton will come to poverty. I desire to fill my own belly, to fill my own sense of desire, my own sense of fun. Don't be among those people who are only seeking to have fun in this life. That doesn't mean we have to be miserable, does it? It doesn't say the miserable will become rich. But it says we have to have a proper perspective. And the perspective is that I don't live for the party. I don't live to feed my own cravings. God has a purpose, and I desire to fulfill that purpose. We're also wasting time on frivolous things is part of seeking pleasure. Proverbs 28. Whoever works his land will have plenty of bread, but he who follows worthless pursuits will have plenty of poverty. Most Christians today are blessed. We are relatively wealthy, even if you look around and say, well, I'm not wealthy. If you look in the larger world, we're relatively wealthy. Not many of us are going hungry this week, are not going to be able to eat this week. Not many of us are living with open sewers. Not many of us are living without a roof over our heads. God has blessed us tremendously And Proverbs provides the wisdom we need on how we should and shouldn't use wealth or his blessings. And so, if we have wisdom in how to use wealth, the first thing we see is we should be generous. We should be generous as God's steward. We should be generous to those in that first group that are truly in need. We should be generous to those who, due to no fault of their own or where they can't help it, their desire is to be faithful to God with their money. Their desire, we should be seeking out to help those people as believers and trusting God to take care of us. Proverbs 28:27. Whoever gives to the poor will not want, but he who hides his eyes will get many a curse. Whoever gives to the poor will not want. That doesn't mean you won't have any personal desires, but it means if you have your priorities straight, you won't want. You will say, God, would I like a little more in my bank account? Who wouldn't? But I much prefer to have the blessings of God, to have the peace that comes with God, from God, to have a good relationship with God, and walk through this life trusting him to provide, than to ignore those that he has sent in my path in need. Notice he says, that you didn't hate him, but he says, hide your eyes. Isn't that kind of the natural tendency? You see somebody in need, and what do? I'll walk this way. We hide our eyes. And we say when we do that, God sees. He sees our hearts. And he says, we'll get many a curse. We'll pay the price. That may mean that God takes it away from us. He says, you are unfaithful. I'm going to give it to faithful people. And sometimes we wonder why we don't have, because God has seen you're not faithful with what I've given you. Why would I give you more? Those that are faithful. But we also have to be faithful to the Lord. Proverbs 3 says, honor the Lord with your wealth and with the first fruits of all your produce. Then your barns will be filled with plenty, and your vats will be bursting with wine. Now remember, these are proverbs. Does that mean that if you give to the church every month, you'll never experience any hard times financially? No, that's not what it means. That's not the purpose here. But what it is saying is, trust God, and he will bless you, whether you have a lot or you have little. Trust him and honor him with whatever he's provided. And notice, it says, honor the Lord with your wealth. And how do we do that? With the first fruits of all your produce. You know what those first fruits are? They're the beginning of the crop being matured when the rest of the field hadn't matured yet. It's the beginning where the nature would say, hey, I finally take this, I can pay the bills for the seed and for all the expenses of the farm. I have the first fruits so that I can pay the bills so that the rest of the crop will all be profit. And yet God says, trust him and give the first fruit to him and trust him for all the needs being met. Trust the Lord. Honor him with your wealth. And when we honor him, we experience the blessings that come from honoring God. Proverbs 11 tells us, a man who is kind benefits himself, but a cruel man hurts himself. The wicked earn deceptive wages, but one who sows righteously gets a sure reward. We have personal blessings when we honor God with our wealth. We receive personal blessings when we honor God by helping others that are truly in need. those who can't help themselves, those who God would have us demonstrate his grace and his mercy through our actions. Proverbs 14:21, whoever despises his neighbor is a sinner, but blessed is he who is generous to the poor. It should be a blessing. If we are grumbling when we help others, then we've missed the point. That's a sure sign we don't have a proper perspective on God's blessing. It's when we are grumbling. We should be excited. God, you were allowing me to help others. God, you're using me to show your grace and your mercy in this person's life. Thank you, Lord. But not only does it have material returns, but it also has divine benefits. Proverbs 11:24. One gives freely, yet grows all the richer. Another withholds what he should give, and only suffers want. Whoever brings blessing will be enriched, and one who waters will himself be watered. If you want to experience God's blessings, then you have to be God's blessing. Now, again, this is a proverb. It doesn't mean when it says one gives freely and yet grows rich that your bank account's going to grow. You grow rich in righteousness. You grow rich with the glory of God. You grow rich in God using you. You grow rich so that one day you come to heaven, you hear, well done, good and faithful servant. That's the treasure that I want. That's the treasure we should be pursuing. Not a huge bank account, but the treasure of God being pleased with his servant. The treasure of God saying, well done, you did it right. You may not have had everything that you thought would make you happy. You may not have had everything that you thought you could obtain, but you obtained the most important thing. Well done. We're told in Proverbs 19, whoever is generous to the poor lends to the Lord, and he will repay him for his deeds. When we are generous to others, those in need, then you know who we're really giving to? We're giving to God. That's part of our first fruits. Part of our first fruits is bring it to God and saying, I have no control where this goes. I'm going to lay it at your feet, give it to your body, the church, and let the church determine where this goes, and trust that you're guiding and using this for your glory. But also part of it is saying, God, I'm going to give to you here by helping this person. God, I'm going to give to you here because you would want me to help. True happiness and worth comes from being used by God as his blessing to others. But we have to be careful about greed. When God blesses, he blesses liberally. And sometimes we miss that it's a blessing, and we fall into that worldly category of greed. We know we're in greed when we're lazy. Proverbs 21:25. The desire of the sluggard kills him, for his hand refuses to labor. All day long he craves and craves, but the righteous gives and does not hold back. If we're in a constant cycle of I want more, I want more, I want more, I want more, then we're not trusting God. That's the pure definition of greed. We may think, well, I'm not a greedy person, but I want this and I want that and I want this and I want here and I want that. That's the definition of greed. God doesn't want us to be greedy because we're just stewards of his money. We're stewards of his resources. He wants us to use it for his glory. We're also told in Proverbs 23, do not eat the bread of a man who is stingy. Do not desire the delicacies, for he is like one who is inwardly calculating. Eat and drink, he says to you, but his heart is not with you. You will vomit up the morsels that you have eaten and waste your pleasant words. That's not a very pretty picture. But trust God, don't trust others. Don't trust to build up your own power or manipulate others with your resources God's given you. Trust God. And finally, there's dangers when we use wealth without wisdom. There's dangers in being greedy. One, it troubles you yourself. Proverbs 1:19. Such are the ways of everyone who is greedy for unjust gain. It takes away the life of its possessor. It's dangerous. It takes away the life. It brings danger to our lives, but it also brings dangers to our family. Proverbs 15:27. Whoever is greedy for unjust gain troubles his own household, but he who hates bribes will live. Greed and a desire to misuse the blessing of the wealth that God has provided for us is dangerous. Not just for ourselves, but it goes well beyond ourselves. It's dangerous for others. We need to be wise in how we use the wealth. When we trust God in how to live, we can gain wisdom regarding the proper perspective and use of money. Through this wisdom, we can experience wealth that comes from honest labor and generosity that springs from a merciful heart. Proverbs tells us a lot about wealth and how to use it properly. And if we boiled all of this down, it's that it's not yours. It's not yours. Wealth is not yours. It's the grace of God trusting you with resources to be used by God, to be a blessing of others. And that's the perspective we have to take with any blessings he's given us in the way of money. Where are you with this? How do you see money? Do you see, I've worked hard all my life. I deserve it. I deserve to be happy. I deserve to get what I want. I want here, I want there. I have a never-ending desire and craving for more things. Or do I see God has blessed me so much? What a gracious God that I serve. And he's given me these opportunities to be a blessing to others. I want to be a blessing. I want them to know the grace of God. I want them to know the love of God. I want them to know the God who loves me and who I've experienced. And I want God to use me as his conduit to do that. That is the attitude as believers we should have. We should desire everybody to know the good and gracious God that we all know. Let's go to the Lord in prayer.